From Chattanooga, Tennessee, it's time for the Gospel Mailbox with Donnie Bryson. If you would like to contact the ministry, you may call Donnie at 423-355-3859. Write Donnie at P.O. Box 2446, Chattanooga, Tennessee 37409. Or email him at this email address, preacher@gospelmailbox.org. And now for today's lesson, here's Donnie Bryson.
Hello, welcome to another edition of our virtual Sunday School class. Today's lesson is entitled God Rescues Peter. And it's in the fall quarter, lesson number 8. It's taken from Acts, the 12th chapter, the first verse through the 11th verse. And the year, to put it in its temporal context, the year is somewhere around 44 A.D. And this is the time period that Paul and Barnabas were out on their missionary journey. But now today's story is about Peter, but just to put it in context, that's when Paul and Barnabas were out on their missionary journey. And the church had spent some time. It'd been about 10 years or so after the day of Pentecost, and the church had begun to take a little bit of a root, and was beginning to present what the secular government felt like a problem and a competition with the secular government, and also too the people of the synagogue were feeling at odds with the church. And we see that there had been like a period of time after the original persecution, and after Saul's conversion, and these things, and when Gamaliel had stood up at the council and had encouraged the Jewish people just to step back and see what would happen. That if it was of God, then they could not resist it, and if it wasn't of God, it would come to naught. And there had been a period of time after that original initial persecution until this period of time, about AD 44, there had been a period of time of silence, and there wasn't a lot of persecution going on during that 10-year period. It had gotten a little bit silent, but we see from the story today that things began to pick up, and that persecution began to come to bear again. But reading the scriptures, we see Acts 12, 1 through 11. Now about that time Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison, and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Peter therefore was kept in prison, but prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. And when Herod would have brought him forth the same night, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and the keepers before the door kept the prison. And behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and a light shined in the prison. And he smote Peter on the side, and raised him up, saying, Arise up quickly. And his chains fell off from his hands. And the angel said unto him, Gird thyself, and bind on thy sandals. And so he did. And he saith unto him, Cast thy garment about thee, and follow me. And he went out, and followed him, and wist not that it was true which was done by the angel, but thought he saw a vision. And when they were past the first and second ward, they came into the iron gate that leadeth into the city, which opened to them of its own accord. And they went out and passed on through one street, and forthwith the angel departed from them. And when Peter was come to himself, he said, Now I know of a surety that the Lord hath sent his angel, and hath delivered me out of the hand of Herod, and from all the expectation of the people of the Jews. Now, going back to the first verse and looking at this on a verse-by-verse basis, we see that in the first verse it reads, Now about that time Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church. Now, in the New Testament, there are several Herods mentioned. And we want to distinguish this particular Herod. This was Herod Agrippa, the son of Aristobulus, and the grandson of Herod the Great. He was the nephew of Herod Antipas, who had John the Baptist beheaded, and brother of Herodias. He was made king by Emperor Caligula, and was put in possession of all the territories formerly held by his uncle Philip and by Licinius. So we see that this particular Herod was made king by one of the most evil of the Roman emperors, Caligula. I mean, Caligula was infamous for being such a reprobate and so sinful. And this is who had made this particular Herod. That is who made this particular Herod king. And by the way the story goes today, it's apparent that that Herod was his man and was the most supportive of Caligula's way of going about things. Then going down to the second verse, and he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword. Now, this particular James that was killed with his sword was James the Greater, who was the son of Zebedee. He was, you have to distinguish him from James, the one that's called James the Less, who was a son of Alphaeus. Now, this particular James was the one who was the brother of the Apostle John, and he was also a member of that inner council. So it appears that maybe Herod was going after the inner circle, the power structure of the church. because he killed James. Maybe he couldn't get his hands on John, but he killed James, and then he was going after Peter, who was another member of that inner circle power structure within the church of those three who were the three main, when you read the Gospels, you see they were the three main core apostles, because when Jesus separated off a smaller group of the apostles, it always was James, John, and Peter. So Herod went after, he killed James, and he comes after to imprison the apostle Peter. Well, going down to the 3rd verse, and because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. So we see here how that Herod would do anything to please the crowds. We find that is one of the, when you start talking about Roman history and Roman emperors, the worst emperors that Rome had were the ones who would do whatever was popular in public opinion and not truly lead. And we see where Herod is suffering from that same defect, to where he saw that when he killed James, it pleased the population, and then he began to, if that pleased him, I'll give him some more of the same. So he goes about and does, and captures Peter and puts him in prison. Okay, going down to the 4th verse, and when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Now, this quaternions, however you say that, I'm having a little bit of trouble with that one, but these 4 quaternions of soldiers basically was four groups of 4. It was actually 16 soldiers that were being involved in keeping guard on the apostle Peter. And they did that very intentionally. It wasn't that they thought that it took 16 of them to whip Peter. That was not it. But the reason why they had such a large group of people keeping an eye on Peter is so that the ones that were watching him would never be tired or sleepy. They took watches throughout the night and switched out, so they always had fresh guards there to keep an eye on somebody. And that's the way they worked it. And with very important prisoners, that they had the fear that people were going to come and try to bust them out, or somebody's going to pull a trick on them or something like that. They always put these groups of 16 guards on them, and they would take and have a couple hour shifts. They would have one chained to each side of the person, and then have 2 at the door. So they would switch out every so many hours. Everybody was always fresh that was watching the prisoner. So that's why they did, and you can see the high value that they put on Peter as far as making sure he didn't get loose. Because they've already had experiences of God miraculously doing things. And they I'm sure, were a little bit concerned that something might happen. So they put the extra manpower into it, the maximum that they would use during that day to watch one person. They put the maximum amount of guards on them that they could during that time period. Okay, going down to the 5th verse. Peter therefore was kept in prison but prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. Now, without ceasing, from the original Greek word ektenes, which is, it's only found one other place in the New Testament, where in 1 Peter 4 and 8, where it says, have fervent charity among yourselves. This is intense, steady, constant, ardent prayer. This is not like a now I lay me down to sleep kind of prayer. This is one of those ringing the prayer bells of heaven kind of prayer. Very intense, fervent kind of prayer. And that's what was going on in the church during this time frame, because they realized that they've already killed James. Peter's next. So they were very concerned about Peter's welfare, because he was in real and present danger at the time. Okay, going down to the 6th verse. And when Herod would have brought him forth, the same night Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and keepers before the door kept the prison. Now we see that Peter knew even if they killed him, he knew where he would end up he was going. He was going to be with the Lord, even if they killed him. But he also knew that the Lord was powerful, and the Lord could deliver him out of anything. We think of Psalms, the 4th chapter, the 8th verse. It says, I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. And that's exactly what Peter was doing at this time. I will both lay me down in peace and keep and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. And we know that that the Lord, when he has us in the palms of his hands, and we know that he loves us. Now, that does not mean you're not going to ever die in your sleep. That doesn't mean your house is never going to catch on fire. What that means is that the Lord is looking out after you, and he's going to be with you through anything that possibly is going to come up or happen. He's going to be with you. And that's what gave Peter the peace to go to sleep inside that prison. Now, going down to the 7th verse, and behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and a light shined in the prison, and he smote Peter on the side, and raised him up, saying, Arise up quickly. And his chains fell off from his hands. Now, we see how that this miraculous thing happened in this prison. We see how the angel came, and as I said earlier, the reason why they had these 16 soldiers is so they could all be fresh. And these soldiers knew that if they went to sleep on the job and somebody got away during their watch while it was their responsibility, if somebody got away, it would mean their life. So it was very important to these guards that Peter not get out. Yet when the angel came, the guards were asleep. So undoubtedly, what had happened, either the angel when he appeared, is the guards were knocked unconscious, or they were put in a trance, or they were put in a coma, or they just went to sleep, miraculously went to sleep, but they were out of it. We see no discussion of these guards making any kind of effort to try to stop this. They're totally silent. So something incapacitated those guards. Now, I also, too, want to point out a little piece of information here when it says in the 7th verse, calls shined in the prison, that Greek word, and it's the only time it occurs in the New Testament, okemi, was used by the Athenians, and it was like a euphemism for prison, but it actually was like dwelling. You can think of it as today, when people talk about prison, a federal prison, talk about the big house, being, another name for prison. But that was, if you, in the original Greek, that's more or less how that reads. Okay, going down to the 8th verse, and the angel said unto him, Gird thyself and bind on thy sandals. And so he did, and saith unto him, Cast thy garment about thee, and follow me. So we see how that Peter was dressed for bed. He had taken his outer garment off. He had taken his shoes off. And the angel basically told him, okay, get your coat and shoes on, we're going. And that's basically what Peter did. And if that had been in current times, that'd been what the angel would have said, get your coat and shoes on. Okay, going down to the 9th verse. And he went out and followed him, and wist not that it was true which was done by the angel, but thought he saw a vision. Now, wist not is a term we don't use anymore. And when the King James Version was translated, even at the time it was translated, they picked a few archaic words, and there's notes that they sent back, the translator sent back and forth substantiating that. But they picked some older words just because they wanted it to sound, to let people know when they were reading it, they were reading text that goes back for quite some amount of time. And that term, wist not, don't feel bad that you don't know what that means, because it's a very old, obsolete verb. It's taken from an obsolete verb, wis, which is taken from Saxon wissen and German wissen and Dutch wissen, and it means to think, to imagine, or to know. So when it says wist not, what it really means is that he knew not. Okay, going down to the 10th verse, when they were past the first and second ward, they came into the iron gate that leadeth unto the city, which opened to them of its own accord. And they went out and passed on through one street, and forthwith the angel departed from him. Okay, going down to the 11th verse. And when Peter was come to himself, he said, Now I know of a surety that the Lord hath sent his angel, and hath delivered me out of the hand of Herod, and from all the expectation of the people of the Jews. Okay, we see that Peter, when he was first brought out of this trance, that we see that he wasn't real sure whether or not he was actually he was actually, he wasn't real sure if he was actually being rescued or if he was seeing a vision. Because we remember back, Peter has seen several of these visions before, and it wasn't actually out in the real tangible world. So it may very well be that Peter thought he was seeing another vision. So, and then after he had made his way through the various sections, after he'd made his way through, he began to realize that yes, this was happening in the actual physical world, that he was actually being delivered. Now, when it starts talking about the first and second ward, that can either mean, there's two ways of interpreting that. One of them would be inside the prison. They had different sections, and he was making it through those different sections. It also could mean different sections of the city, where he was making it through those different sections of the city. And it doesn't really matter, but you can interpret that both ways, and you'll read one commentary that'll talk about it being different sections of the prison, and you'll turn around and read another commentary where it talks about it being different sections of the city as he was making his way through the city. And either way is fine, it doesn't really make any difference. Just a little bit different ways that you can read it. Well, neighbor, tune in again next weekend for our virtual Sunday school class.
You have been listening to the Gospel Mailbox with Donnie Bryson. If you would like to contact the ministry, you may call Donnie at 423-355-3859. Write Donnie at P.O. Box 2446, Chattanooga, Tennessee 37409. Or email him at this email address, preacher@thegospelmailbox.org.